Hey everyone, D here. I know I haven't made a video in a while, but this is something I feel like I have to talk about. So, in Australia, which is where I live, it's the country that I live in, they implemented, well, they haven't implemented it yet, but they have decided to attempt to implement an under 16 social media ban. And I wanted to talk about it today, and today is the 1st of December, Sunday. So 9 days before they implement the ban, or at least attempt to. They what their ideal goal is to prevent under 16s from accessing social media, accessing the internet, which I think is a brilliant idea for those who are too young to be accessing the internet. I believe there is genuinely a lot of bad stuff on the internet, and it is sometimes too easy to access. But the thing that is a negative impact from this ban is how it affects people, not just under 16s. There hasn't really been any solid proof on what we can expect this ban to look like. But what we do know is that how does it actually work? Well, we know that it was rumored to prevent under 16s from creating social media accounts, and we're not entirely sure if it's actually going to block the website completely. There's no real proof as to what the ban will really actually look like on December 10th, or how they will really even implement it. And in terms of needing to vote for it, it was a bill from when we first voted, but I feel like it wasn't really on the high list of priorities. I feel like people wanted to focus on something else more ideally. It was just something that was in the background. And it really does have an impact on everybody's daily lives because it's not just affecting those under 16s. It's affecting everybody else who needs to access the internet in their daily lives. I feel like it's a big issue. While it's great that we're trying to shield a lot of young eyes from what they shouldn't be seeing on the internet, it's just those older people who need to access the internet. For example, people like me who want to create content for you guys to enjoy, or somebody who works in an office where accessing the internet on a regular basis is very important to them. What can we expect as a sort of way for us older people to bypass this ban and access what we need to access on the internet? But that just, it has a broad affected spectrum. Like, there's already a lot of people who create content in Australia who have talked about this, and there are a lot of Australian content creators who've actually left the country to continue creating their content because this has quite the large impact on them. It's, I feel like we need to sort of, there's not a lot of transparency on the topic in terms of how it's going to affect us as a whole. There's just not a lot of transparency around it, and the feeling of not knowing can be pretty daunting sometimes. But what we really want to try and focus on here is how is it going to affect the daily lives of the people who are going to need to use it. What sort of verification are we going to create? What sort of barriers are we going to make? And how can these barriers be bypassed for us people who are older, who need to access the internet to do something like this? And how does this ban work as a whole? If, because it's rumored that the UK and the US are going to try and do something similar. It's just that Australia is global first for this under 16 ban, but at the same time, it's how do we implement it successfully? You know, these young people are going to be very resourceful in trying to get around the ban and continue their use of the internet. How is this going to stop them completely? How is it going to allow anybody else to continue using it normally? I feel like there was a rumor that, I'm not sure if it's completely true or not, that they were going to use the digital ID system to access the internet. So when you performed an action on the internet, you would put in your ID, which I feel like can be a very solid way of providing some sort of identification as to the fact that you're over 16, but I also feel like it can be a very major breach of privacy. It's a large invasion of your privacy. That information is very, very important. It shouldn't really be shared on a platform such as this. Because when we post something on the internet, it's obviously going to be on there forever. I feel like that's not really something we should be doing with such a very, very carefully, critical piece of our identity. I don't feel like we should really be putting that on the internet to sort of say, hey, look at me, I'm over 16. I feel like that's not really the strongest idea. While it provides that strong piece of identity to prove that you're over 16, I feel like the internet just isn't a safe place to store that sort of information. Because there is a lot of stuff on the internet that just doesn't disappear. It's almost impossible to get rid of something on the internet. It just feels like an entire, and this is just the best way in my mind that I can describe it. It's just a total clusterfuck. There's no real sort of proof that this ban is going to work. We haven't seen what a test of it's going to look like. We haven't really seen anything about it. We've just heard what the politicians have spoken about it. There's no real proof of what this ban actually has to offer us as a community, as a whole, as a nation, for the globe, really. If this is something that the entire world wants to implement to protect children, how can we be sure that it's going to even work here when we don't really have any idea what it's going to look like? It's confusing, daunting, a bit in the grey. We sort of still don't know how this is going to affect us until we really see it actually get implemented. But until we sort of see what that looks like, maybe not. But it's sort of why I stopped making videos. I sort of wanted to monitor this ban closely and see what sort of direction it decided to take. It was very, very sort of something you needed to pay attention to in sort of somebody who's going to be affected by it. So they consider, these are the sort of platforms that they consider should be age restricted. So they decided to implement Facebook, Instagram, Kik, Reddit, Snapchat, Threads, TikTok, Twitch, X, formerly Twitter, and YouTube. These are quite large platforms in a lot of people's daily lives. And we can sort of see that these platforms are going to have to implement and work with our government to implement the ban. But we sort of haven't seen anything from the companies themselves really at all yet either. So what can we expect from them? What can we expect from the politicians and the government? How can we sort of expect them to work together to create a ban? Because there are already websites out there that do implement this sort of are you over 18 sort of verification. We know that Google uses that over 18 verifications for YouTube, but also I feel like this ban, if it's ideally just trying to stop children under 16 from having an account, what stops them from signing out of their current account and continuing to use the platform? Is that sort of what we can expect from the ban? Will it really be effective in that sort of state? Is that how it's going to work? How is it going to function like that? Will it ask for that identity, or will it just sort of implement that verification for an account? If so, if I sign out, will my platform continue to work like normal? Is that how it's going to sort of affect that? Like, it's just very confusing at this current stage, and at this current point in time, there's not really much that's known about it. It's sort of just it's just, yeah, it's so just hard to describe in that sort of sense, but that's the really important question, is how is it going to affect us? Us normal people who are not under that age of 16, and how does it affect our daily lives? How does it affect the people that rely on these platforms as their source of income in this country? How does it affect all these people who work, say, in an office, who require access to these platforms, like a social media content director in an office for promotions? And can we expect to see ad revenue take a massive hit from this? How will the online economy take a large hit? Will it take a large hit and go down? Will it plummet? Or will it not really be affected in any sort of way? Because that is a large part of, I feel like it's a large part of any economy in any country, is that online e-commerce, that sort of ad revenue from accessing websites. You know, you go to your favorite website on a daily basis and there's a little ad in the corner. Their website creator gets paid for that ad, but if you're not there to see that ad, how can he expect to see income from his website or their website? How do they get their income if you're not there to provide it for them? It's just a very confusing sort of if, when, how sort of thing. There's not really a lot on it or much to talk about it. It's sort of that very transparent sort of grey area, like how it's very impossible to describe. But what can we expect to see? Can you show us what it will look like? It's just very, yeah, just throw your hands up, do a bunch of gestures, and see where that takes you. Like, what's going on? You know, so it's sort of in that area where you throw your hands up, sort of do your little gesture, like, what can we expect? This is just a little rant, sort of what can I expect from it as a person, as a content creator, small content creator on this platform. Like, what can I expect to see from it? What will I get out of it? What will it look like for people like me and things like that? But I sort of just wanted to talk about it today, sort of just to understand what direction we were going to head in. It's sort of to let you know what's probably going to end up happening. Videos will probably end up just randomly coming to a halt for a lot of Australian content creators such as myself, and I sort of just wanted to clarify that, sort of shed some light onto this topic as its whole. I know that this topic's probably being talked about around the world a little bit, as, you know, Australia being the first to implement this under 16 ban. But I feel like I just had to sort of talk about it today, just to let everybody who indulges in my content know probably what's going to happen to me as a person after this ban. I probably won't be able to make videos depending on how the ban gets implemented and prevents me from accessing the website as a person, because I don't generally feel comfortable if that's how they're going to implement it. I don't generally feel comfortable sharing such a critical piece of my identity online, since it sort of stays on the internet and it can be very accessible in a scary way. I don't feel like that's something I should very confidently just enter into the internet. I have to be wary, I have to be vigilant of what I'm putting on the internet as a person. So it's just sort of that thing I wanted to talk about today, to sort of let everybody know what sort of direction I was going to head in terms of this ban. If the option was available to me, I would leave the country and continue this somewhere else. But me as a person, that's not really an option. I sort of have to stay here. So, and it's not like I don't like where I live. It's just this affects me a lot. And I'm sure it affects everybody else as equally as much as me. Anybody who wants to freely consume content on the internet. Obviously, anybody who's as old as I am, just wanting to actively engage in content on the internet and be a part of an online community. But that's just sort of, yeah, what I wanted to talk about as a quick little rant, unscripted, whatever, just talking about the state of this law ban, what they wanted to implement as, I don't know, I guess a government. But I just sort of running out of things to say about it. It's just, I guess I just have to wait and see in what it will look like across the next 9 days or so. But thank you for listening. If you listened to the whole 16 minutes of me just absolutely ranting, but thank you for listening. And sort of, if you do some research on the topic, well, that's entirely your choice. But thank you for listening, and see you next time.